Welcome to the channel, everybody. I'm so excited you're here. If you're new, feel free to grab a cup of tea or coffee and enjoy while I review Phantastes. So this book was written by George MacDonald, who's a great influence on a lot of writers. The most prominently known to me would be C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien. What's really cool is the copy of my book that I have actually has an introduction by C.S. Lewis. And it's very interesting because C.S. Lewis, in this introduction, I believe, and in other places, has stated that he considers George MacDonald to be his master. I don't believe Lewis ever actually met George MacDonald in person, but as a young man, he really admired his writings. And it's funny because he struggled with some of it at first because George MacDonald was a Christian, Lewis at the time was not, so he had kind of issues with his faith, but he couldn't get away from the fact that he loved his writing and that he was just kind of enraptured by his style and the stories that he told. And he loved myth and the fairy tales that George MacDonald told. He just, had such a hunger for those stories. I believe it's in Lewis's work, The Great Divorce, where he actually puts George MacDonald in that story as a character. But back to Phantastes. It was originally published in 1858. And what I'm gonna do is just kind of give you an overview of the plot and then, some takeaways in terms of what I thought about the story overall, the feel of it, the writing style, so on. Just so you know, there's gonna be probably some light spoilers. The book is kind of out there, it's kind of crazy. I would say it's almost impossible in a way to avoid spoilers because it's not a very traditional book in the way that it's told. At least to me, I find it very, very interesting. But I do find it enjoyable and I'll explain why. So to start out, the main character is a young man named Anodos, which I didn't know this until after I read the book. His name actually means pathless in Greek, which is actually perfectly fitting for the nature of his character and the story itself. And it starts with him actually meeting his grandmother in the form of a fairy in his secretary, it's like a writing desk, a secretary desk. And so she's like, "Hey, I'm your grandmother." And he's like, "No, you're not. That's super weird." She's like, "How do you know?" Which again, it's super bizarre, but it's very interesting. I should also mention, before I forget, that this book is called Phantastes and the subtitle is a Faerie Romance. And I think that is a heavy theme throughout the whole book, is this romantic wooing of the character himself, whether that be through nature or the places that he stays or the marble lady, his ideal view of the feminine. So that being said, with it being a fairy romance, I should also mention that this is a fairy tale for adults. So it's not that it's full of crude things by any means. It's just that the themes and the nature of it is just more mature. I think kids could still enjoy it in some sense. They probably wouldn't be able to follow the plot very much because the plot is kind of crazy. Some might argue there is really no plot. But anyway, it's more mature in theme. That being said, along with the plot summary here, he's in fairyland now and he's traveling. It's very kind of subdued and normal at first. It's just nature and beauty. And he comes across this lady who has this hut. I believe she has a daughter. Again, I could be wrong. Someone has a daughter. There's a family he meets at some point. But he meets this lady at first and she recognizes him and she notices that he's human, but she also notices that he's half fairy because of his grandmother. And I believe she is too. I could be wrong on that as well. Anyway, she realizes that he's kind of stands out in the world. And she's like, "Hey, you need to be careful. Here's some things to look out for." And so the trees, some are friendly, some are not. And she warns him be careful of the ash tree, which is a tree that actually can move and has been following him. And so as you find out, as you read, so much of this is again, symbolic of spiritual things, because it basically makes no sense. And if you have an idea of what fairy tales are already, which essentially everybody does, is you have grace to give a little leeway to things that are kind of out there. Even obviously in Lord of the Rings, we have Ents, they're these tree-like creatures. Anyway, circling back around here. So this is also the place where he first really sees fairies. And when I say that in the context of what a modern reading audience might view as fairies. And so these are garden fairies, small winged creatures who live in the garden. And it's funny, I like the way he describes it. Basically flowers are their houses, their homes. and they're kind of mischievous, and they mimic, and you know, they view Anodos as kind of like almost like a child. So there's a sense that these fairies are like mature and childish at the same time. And I don't know, it creates a lot of intrigue, a lot of mystery, and the way he describes them is just, I find really fascinating. And there's also this cool scene where they take the petals of the leaves and they make boats out of them on the water. So there's all these fairies like on the water. It's just beautiful imagery. And as he goes, it's fitting that his name is Pathless, because he might get a sense of like someone will tell him like, hey, go this way. So he's operating on trust. There's other times where he needs to go somewhere and he doesn't know what to do, so he has to just make a decision. So he doesn't always strictly have this goal of like where he needs to go, other than that he knows he needs to travel. He knows he needs to go through Fairyland, because he knows he's going to get back to the real world at some point, but he's not going to get there unless he travels through the land. What's interesting about this along the way is he meets all different kinds of characters. He does meet the Marble Lady, who he comes to realize is not just a statue, that like she's an actual lady, and he's trying to figure out how to like bring her to life, basically. And as he meets certain people, he makes good decisions, sometimes he doesn't, he makes bad decisions. And what's interesting about Fairyland, almost everything in the land is a fairy in a sense, like, or fae. They're just different kinds of fairies. So sometimes the way he interacts with things can have, you know, severe consequences or not. So one thing I find very fascinating about the story is he has several moments where he essentially knows the right thing to do. You know, he knows that this would be the proper way to go about this, or if he doesn't know, he's like, I should ask this person, or I should seek, you know, a different path here. But then there's times where he has such a great desire, because there's many things in Fairyland that are very attractive and very beautiful, and he wants to be a part of it or united with it, and he doesn't have the patience to find the right way to do that. So he'll act in a way that is selfish. And so there's consequences to that. One of them being is the attachment of his shadow. So obviously we all have shadows. That's, you know, an easy thing to understand, but we don't think about our shadows very much. And this is still a little bit different. He uses the shadow as an example of darkness, right? Of like, there's something wrong within you that you need to work out, something, you know, that you're struggling with. Like for me as a believer, as a Christian, and this could be what he was alluding to, it's just your fallen nature as a person. The fact that you sin and that you need to be redeemed. You need to be saved from that. You need to, you know, be sanctified and cleansed. So this idea of the shadow is something that it boldly confronts him, and he realizes, oh no, I have this shadow now, and he can't get rid of it. And for the longest time, he can't even hardly stop thinking about it. And he occasionally gets to points where it's not constantly distracting him or like in his face, but it's still this theme throughout the whole story of like, how do I get rid of this? When am I gonna get rid of this? And there's even a point where he gets to the Fairy Queen's castle, which is a very interesting part of the book, and you know, there's a place for him to rest. For the most part, he doesn't notice his shadow while he's there. Not trying to give away too many details or spoil anything, but near the end, he's met all these people, and he comes into contact with this knight that he actually met earlier in the story. And he realizes he needs to become better, and he needs to find his path and his way forward. And he pledges himself to this knight, and he becomes this knight's squire. I think that's really all I can give you for now in terms of plot summary without spoiling too much. The narrative is not typical in like, oh, I see this is Anodos and that he needs to go on this journey to become a better person. Like that is there, but it's not explicit. You don't really know that till the end. You're finding that out like the entire time, basically. It's being revealed to you like every step of the way. So it's like, you don't know like, oh, he needs to go to the Fairy Queen and he needs to get this potion, or he needs to pledge himself to the knight. Like you don't know really what his goal is or what he has to accomplish, or if he has to save somebody. It's just like every scene, every step is a mystery. You're like, oh, who's this random person? You know, like, oh, they took him into another realm for a second. Now he's back in Fairyland. You know, like there's just along the way he gets into darkness and there's these goblin fairies, and you're like, what are goblin fairies? And there's not really an explanation for that other than they exist. You know, like it's just everything is new. Everything is like, okay, this was a bad experience. you know, with the ash tree. Now I gotta go this way and get away from the ash tree. Oh, now I'm here. Now I meet these people and I do this for a while and I help out this village. And then now I'm over. It's this constant like going from place to place, new creatures, new people, new environments. And you don't really know what all these things are leading up to until you get to the end. And again, it's not like there's this like, oh, I get it now. Maybe there is for certain readers, but for me, I feel like I got something out of it. I feel like, oh, I see what this is. But it really, I think it's just the path of any person, in this case, a young man, of like being steadfast and keep moving forward. Yes, you make mistakes, but you know, you make better choices and you find people who believe in you and support you and who build you up and heal you and show you that the shadow doesn't have to stay, that the shadow can be removed. So it's very much a spiritual book, I would say, or supernatural, you know, fairy, however you want to view it. But again, in the context of my faith, it's a cool story to look at, because I got this sense from the book that, at least, you know, maybe this is the way George MacDonald viewed the world. I don't know for sure, but I think he's trying to explain to people that like your idea of the spiritual realm is not as far away as you might think. Because like people who believe what I believe would say like, yeah, I believe in the spiritual realm, I believe in spirits, but I don't really understand it. And that's okay. It's not that you have to like understand all the ins and outs or whatever. And I'm definitely not advocating like seeking out spiritualism or new ageism. And I don't think George is either. It's just the point is like there are eternal things all around us that just by God's nature and God's design are there, and that sometimes we get this sense of it. You know, we don't always have the words to put it into. And I think that was kind of maybe what he was trying to do with this book, was give an idea of his feelings about the supernatural and about like the spirit, you know, the Holy Spirit. You know, obviously God is spirit. We believe in eternal things. So I think it's not to say that fairyland in this story is heaven, but just that there's more at work sometimes than just the mundane. You know, like sometimes you just think everything's the same, every day is the same, every process is the same, you know, and you don't notice like the beauty around you. You know, the fact that God has put like, that God has made songbirds for a reason, right? Like they're beautiful. There's something nice about the chirping of birds. There's something nice about the rustling of the leaves. And, you know, I'm not trying to be mystical or weird here. I'm just saying it's like, you notice, you know, and for you, it might be something totally different, but you'll notice there's things in your life like this thing in my life actually brings me peace. And I can't really explain it. It gives me a sense that there's something beyond just what I see. And I think that, again, maybe in its simplest form is what this book is about. It's just like knowing that there's purpose for your life, that there's a God beyond you that loves you, and that he's gonna bring you through this life, through the path that you're on. So hopefully you're able to track with that. And by the way, all my beliefs I base on the Bible. Mind you, I'm not basing it on this book or other books. Anything I view about the spiritual would be based on scripture, and I hope the same would be true for you. So I'm not advocating to go seek out other things. So I do recommend this book, especially if you like fairy tales. I would say be prepared. There's a lot of older words in here, so it might not be like the smoothest, quickest read for you, but I would say it's still beautifully written. It evokes a ton of imagery, which I think is a lot of fun. And it's pretty amazing to me. Like, you can read a sentence in here and sometimes you'll be like, dude, he just communicated like 4 different things in this. Like, he can pack a lot into one sentence. So you do occasionally have to be pretty focused, but I don't want to make it sound like it's the most intimidating book ever. Again, if you're reading it even just for the descriptions of Fairyland and for the beautiful descriptions, I would say that's worth it too. But yeah, I recommend Phantastes. It's a really good book. Thank you for checking out my review, guys, and for making it this far in the video. If you did, I so appreciate that. If you enjoyed this video or you found any value in it, please consider liking the video, guys. That helps me a lot. Also, if you did enjoy it or think someone else would, please consider sharing as well as subscribing Subscribing would also help so much, guys, because I'm really trying to grow this channel and make more content like this for you guys. If you like this content, let me know. I'd love to know if you've read this book or have any other recommendations for George MacDonald's works, anything like that. I love starting a conversation with you guys. As always, guys, I so appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.